The CEO didn't even look up from his screen when he fired me. Just grinned and said, "You're still here, the exit's behind you," like I was a smudge on his shiny new startup vision. Like I hadn't spent 6 years keeping his entire empire duct taped together with a migraine and a half-charged badge. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just looked him dead in the eye, smiled, and walked out. No box, no goodbye, just one hand in my purse, palming the only thing that could shut the lights off. Let me rewind a little before we get to the meltdown. Because this isn't a TED talk and I sure as hell don't wear a Patagonia vest. I'm Jessica, 41, divorced, lover of iced coffee, German shepherds, and watching men in loafers underestimate me. I ran compliance and system integrity at Viron Systems, the enterprise darling you've probably never heard of, but whose software keeps half the Fortune 500 from accidentally emailing their tax returns to Nigerian princes. My code ran through every single pipeline. I didn't just build the backbone of the company, I was the backbone. But you wouldn't know it from the way they treated me. I didn't go to the mixers, didn't bake gluten-free banana muffins for offsites. I was the one on call at 2 a.m. when the encryption cycle glitched and an entire defense client nearly went nuclear. You think anyone remembered my birthday? Hell, once I got a Slack ping on Christmas Day. "Hey Jess, can you hop on a quick call?" Prods read, "You know what I said, give me 5, dogs mid-poop," because even my shepherd knew when things stank. Still, they kept me. Quietly, grudgingly. Because when the servers hiccuped or the release schedules hit a wall, there I was, solving things in 12 terminal windows and a black coffee. I didn't care about promotions or plaques. I cared about stability, about making things work so other people could pretend they were brilliant. Oh, and quick pause here, since you're already this deep into my glorious meltdown story. If you're enjoying this mess, and you know you are, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and throw a like. It keeps the team going. God knows they're working harder than half the execs in this story. Anyway, back to the chaos. For a long time, I was the ghost in the machine. Payroll didn't know what I looked like. HR spelled my name Jessica in 3 separate documents. The interns thought I was a myth, some IT banshee who lived in the server room and only emerged during solar flares. But when a compliance audit came through, suddenly I had 3 calendar invites and a flurry of hey just looping you in emails from people who'd never once said good morning. I didn't care. Not really. Not at first. I was raised by a mother who taught me that being indispensable meant you'd never be disposable. God rest her soul, she meant well. But that woman never met a CEO who used the word synergy unironically while firing a third of the company to impress a VC. Turning point came when our new golden boy CEO swaggered in, straight from some failed crypto app with a vision for disruption. His first all hands? He started with a slide deck titled Slay the Legacy. That's what he called anyone over 35 who'd been at the company longer than 2 years. Legacy, like we were outdated firmware, like we'd glitched the shiny pipeline of his dreams. I watched him toss out whole departments like they were expired yogurt. People cried in the kitchen while he called it streamlining, said he was unblocking the arteries of innovation. I was the last holdout in compliance because no one really knew how my systems were wired together. Not even legal, not even the CTO. The former one anyway, he got retired a week after recommending I be moved up. I kept my head down, until the day he called me into that meeting. Public, of course. Open floor plan. Standing desk theater. "Jessica," he said, "we're pivoting. Your roles no longer aligned with our strategic goals." I asked if those goals included making the platform legally unusable in 3 weeks. He chuckled, said, "Don't worry, we've got contractors for that now." And that's when I knew. He didn't understand what I'd built. None of them did. The encrypted tunnels, the offline backups, the real-time failover checks that only functioned when I authorized sync with the physical token. The master key wasn't stored in the cloud. It wasn't even on the internal drives. It lived in one place. A place that just so happened to be tucked into the side pocket of my purse as I walked past security and out into the sunlight. I didn't slam the door. I didn't write a farewell email or tweet about toxic culture. I just left, quiet, controlled, like pulling the pin from a grenade you keep in your lap at brunch. And as I crossed the parking lot, I knew one thing: they had no idea what had just walked out the door. But they would. Very, very soon. He walked in like he owned gravity. Aviators indoors, custom sneakers like a toddler with a venture fund. The kind of guy who thinks staring at you during a Zoom call is the same thing as leadership. Day 1, he took over the glass corner office, replaced the ficus with a whiskey decanter, and sent out a Slack. "Let's make waves, team. Legacy is over. It's time to disrupt." His name was Gavin, Gavin with a Y. Gavin, who once gave a keynote on emotional scalability at a startup summit in Vegas and hasn't shut up about it since. The board hired him to reinvigorate the brand, which we all knew was code for fire the people who actually built the damn thing and replace them with yoga bros who think JSON is a protein shake. He didn't schedule one-on-ones. He scheduled alignment collisions. Didn't do status updates, he wanted vulnerability check-ins. You couldn't ask a question without hearing, "Let's unpack that," or "What's the emotion behind this concern?" What emotion? Rage, Gavin. The emotion is rage. Within a week, he started what he called the Clean Slate Initiative, fancy title. Basically, he brought in a slide deck and began slashing departments like he was playing corporate fruit ninja. Sales, halved. Customer success, offboarded for automation. Facilities, redundant in a hybrid first world. And then he turned his gaze toward the basement corner of the org chart where I lived, infrastructure compliance and access governance. He clicked to a slide with a big red X over my team's name. Non-innovative, it read, legacy code support. No mention of how we kept their certifications up to date. No mention of the fact that every security audit we passed in the last 5 years had my initials on the checklist. Just a smug little bullet point, outsourceable. I watched it happen from the back of the room, sipping a cold brew from my Not My Circus, Not My Monkey's mug. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. I watched Gavin talk about agility like he invented the word. Watched him pace in his $600 hoodie with the urgency of a man who once watched The Social Network and thought Zuckerberg was the hero. 3 days later, I got the invite. No subject line, just a calendar placeholder that read, sync. I walked into the fishbowl conference room, glass walls, echoing acoustics, too many chairs for one-on-ones. Gavin was already seated, legs crossed like a tech monk. He looked up from his MacBook, stickered to death with buzzwords, and gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Jessica, he said, like we were old friends sharing tea, thanks for coming. I'll get straight to it, we're moving fast. Your team's been identified as low impact. We've decided to sunset your role effective immediately. No preamble, no rationale, just a bullet through the chest, gift-wrapped in synergy. Effective when? I asked. He tilted his head, trying for faux compassion. The exit's behind you. I swear I felt my spine go ice cold. Not from fear, God no, but from the sheer velocity of restraint. Because somewhere deep in me, a voice screamed. The voice of every late night, every missed weekend, every moment I stopped this company from crumbling under its own weight. But I didn't give him that. I gave him silence. I stood, smoothed my sleeves, and smiled. That's when the lead engineer Ali poked his head in. Poor guy looked like he'd just swallowed a stapler. Hey, Jessica, before you head out, where's the token? Legal's asking. They can't initiate the encryption cycle. I turned to him calmly. What token? He blinked. You know, the master key. For the release cycles, I shrugged. I assumed legal had it, or maybe DevOps. Then I walked out. I could feel Gavin watching me, probably thinking I was being gracious, professional, maybe even intimidated. That's the thing about men like him, they mistake silence for weakness. But I wasn't being silent to be polite. I was being silent because it was going to be so much fun watching him squirm. As I rode the elevator down, I thought about everything they were about to find missing. Not just files or credentials, no. I'd been careful, strategic. There were layers. Layers even I couldn't explain without diagrams and a whiteboard. But the heart of it all, the pulsing core of compliance, encryption, and release authorization, sat in my purse, humming quietly like a loaded pistol under a trench coat. And it wasn't just hardware I took with me. I took the legal architecture, audit trails, the buried clauses, the quiet signatures they all rubber-stamped without reading. I took the system itself. The funny thing, if Gavin had even once asked what I actually did, he might have known what he was detonating. Instead, he grinned at the mushroom cloud with no idea the fallout had already begun. 2 years before Gavin swaggered into the building with his discount Tony Robbins energy, I had already started preparing for war. Not because I'm some prophet, because I know how this game works. The minute your codebase stabilizes, the execs start acting like they did it all themselves. They forget the 3 a.m. fire drills, the hot patches, the duct tape and caffeine-fueled miracles. You go from the hero who saved Q2 to the expense line we can trim. Every time. Doesn't matter how many 0 days you patched or how many compliance reports you filed at the 11th hour. Eventually, someone young and dumb with a podcast will show up and ask why you're still on payroll. So I built insurance. It started small. A few cron jobs that logged unauthorized access attempts. Then a custom script that monitored certificate expirations across critical systems. Then a full-blown dashboard, my own private control center, hidden behind 3 layers of obfuscation, and a deliberately boring shell UI titled HR Archives FY16. And at the heart of it all, the token. Not the kind you think. This wasn't some standard RSA dongle or vendor-issued MFA stick. This was custom. Built by me and one very paranoid cryptography professor I dated briefly before he ran off to join an infosec commune in Vermont. We called it the Tooth. The Tooth was a small, nondescript USB-C device with no identifying marks, no internal storage, and no standard OS compatibility. It was designed to function as a physical cosigner on encryption unlocks and release pushes. Without it, certain core functions couldn't be executed, no matter how high your credentials went. CTO, blocked. Legal, blocked. Root access, irrelevant because the Tooth wasn't part of the system. It was outside it, intentionally. And here's the kicker. I never registered it in any asset inventory. Never logged it in Jira. Never mentioned it in an email. If you didn't know it existed, you wouldn't even know what was missing, only that the system refused to proceed. Like a blood cell without a nucleus. Alive but inert. Every quarter I'd run quiet tests. Token in, token out. Simulate credential revocation. Watch how the system responded. Adjust the protocol. Harden the logic. I wrote it so that if I were ever removed from the system unilaterally, without proper de-escalation and transitional clearance, would trigger a silent shutdown cascade across the compliance nodes. Not an explosion, not a flashy breach, just silence. A whisper of non-functionality. Systems would stay online, lights green, dashboards calm, but nothing would move, no releases, no new client provisioning, no certificate renewals, just inertia and no logs pointing to why. It was beautiful and vengeful. But it wasn't about spite, at least not entirely. It was about dignity, about proving a point they'd never be able to say out loud. That one quiet, middle-aged woman with flat shoes and zero Instagram presence had held their kingdom together for 6 years with grit, gumption, and an engineering style best described as battlefield triage meets librarian paranoia. And when the day came, when the big, dumb hand of progress finally came down on my desk, I didn't have to scream. I didn't have to call HR or threaten legal action. I just reached into my purse and felt the familiar click of the tooth against my fingers. The moment I walked out that building, I crossed a line. Not into criminality, I made damn sure of that. Everything was legal, documented, ratified under previous leadership, buried in compliance memos that no one had read past page 7. There was even a clause 14F, signed off during a quarterly review that explicitly gave me co-sign authority on critical release infrastructure until such time as I was fully and properly offboarded with credential transition. You know what didn't happen? Any of that. They just booted me, like I was an old couch. Like I hadn't spent hundreds of hours safeguarding the very protocols that were now gasping without me. And the best part? They didn't even know yet, because systems like the one I built don't scream when they break. They hum, they wait, they lull you into a false sense of control. But somewhere in that building, someone was about to try pushing a routine update, and the system would just stare back, blank, waiting, for the one thing they couldn't buy, replace, or reinvent in a war room. Me. It started with a failed push. Nothing dramatic. Just a routine update for one of our long-time logistics clients. Something about real-time invoice reconciliation. The kind of thing we'd done 1,000 times before. Illy, the lead engineer, ran the release script like always, sipping his caramel oat milk monstrosity, eyes half on his monitor, half on whatever TikTok algorithm had glued itself to his brain. But this time, the script stalled. At first, he figured it was a permissions hiccup. Happens. Someone changes a config file, forgets to push a branch. But this wasn't that. Build verified, the deployment initiated, and then, right at the signing checkpoint, it just stopped. Authorization pending, no error code, no warning, just that single line blinking back at him. Authorization pending. Lee tried again, nothing. He called over Carly from DevOps, who swore the CI/CD pipeline was green. Logs were clean. Access keys were valid. You change anything in the approval node, he asked. Nope, she said. All tokens passed validation. This isn't us. They rebooted the deploy node. Killed all hanging processes. Even tried a manual override, which, by the way, should have triggered a big red flag in legal. Nothing. Authorization pending. By noon, 5 other teams had reported similar failures: SSL renewal locks, data warehouse archiving stalling, even HR's payroll sync was flagged incomplete. One tried rerouting through a backup environment, and the system responded with a flat authorization denied, co-signature required. That's when the finger-pointing began. Tech blamed DevOps. DevOps blamed legal. Legal, always late to the party, showed up like an ex-boyfriend at a wedding and demanded escalation. Who has final sign-off on release execution? Asked Maya from legal, flipping through her notes like they might magically rearrange themselves into answers. Illy. Pale now, muttered Jessica. Jessica used to. Silence. Was that ever updated? Meyer asked. Dunno, he said. That was her thing. It wasn't just my thing, it was the thing. The keystone they'd all ignored. Maya stormed off to check archived compliance notes. Carly reran the credentials list. Someone tried to brute force a bypass using elevated credentials and locked themselves out of 3 subsystems. Illy, finally sweating through his ironic world's okayest coder hoodie, turned to his monitor and muttered, she said it'd bite us one day. Oh, Illy, honey, it's already chewing through the walls. Around 1:37 p.m., Gavin held an emergency huddle. I say huddle, but it was really just him pacing in the middle of the open floor plan, arms crossed like a disrespected boy band frontman. He was trying to spin it like unexpected platform turbulence. Tossed out buzzwords like resilience audit and velocity realignment, said we were entering a test of adaptive throughput. No one knew what the hell he meant. In the background, Lee was trying again to access the encryption cycle signing authority. It now required dual authentication, 1 key in the system and 1 external hardware token. No token, no override, authorization pending. That's when someone asked the question out loud. Where's Jessica? Phones rang, text chains lit up. Lee tried my old number first, straight to voicemail. Hey, Jessica, it's Lee. Quick question, weird thing with the deployment stack, call me? I didn't. Carly tried next. Hey Jess, hope you're okay. Just wondering if you remember anything about the release protocol fallback? We're kinda stuck. I wasn't. They tried my personal email. Auto reply, this address is no longer active. Slack, I was already deactivated. HR had seen to that. They even pinged me on LinkedIn, bless their hearts. I left the message unread. Because this was the part where the panic begins to bloom. Where the surface tension holds, but the cracks are forming beneath the paint. Where people start saying things like, did anyone document what she did? And wait, are we even allowed to touch that node? And who has her version control keys? Meanwhile, I was at home. Feet up, fresh tea steeping. Dog curled at my feet. Watching the logs I had set up outside their system light up with failed handshake attempts, each one like a little symphony of desperation. Beautiful, controlled. One by one, they hit the wall I'd built, not to harm, but to prove something they'd never admit, that not all infrastructure is visible, that not all value wears a blazer and networks at happy hour, that sometimes the most dangerous person in the building is the one who walks out smiling and doesn't look back. And the wildest part? They still hadn't realized what was really missing. The phrase that cracked it open wasn't screamed in a boardroom or thundered over a speakerphone. It was whispered, flat, nervous. What clause? It came from Maya, legal's golden child, 48 hours into the outage, eyes ringed with caffeine regret, her inbox hemorrhaging, partner emails demanding answers. Clients were circling. Contracts were paused. A seven-figure logistics upgrade went into indefinite suspension. One client, one with a government badge watermark on every PDF, politely asked if their next quarterly review would be conducted by candlelight. Maya had been buried deep in the compliance tomb, digging through old Confluence pages and shared drives, titled things like Do Not Delete Archived SR15 Board Notes, V3 Final PDF. And there, in the dead center of an obscure policy update from 2 fiscal years back, wedged between an outdated ISO clause and a diagram of a decommissioned VPN node, she found it. Clause 14F. Designated encryption cosigner shall remain active until proper offboarding procedure is executed in compliance with Credential Succession Protocol 9b. Failure to adhere shall result in default security posture, credential freeze, and system release suspension. She read it again, then again. Her voice, and she called the emergency compliance sync, was a mix of disbelief and dread. Guys, Jessica wasn't just lead compliance. She was designated cosigner for encryption releases. It was formalized, approved by the board. And this is key, it's non-transferable without structured succession and her written clearance. The room went still. Gavin blinked. So you're telling me we need her to sign off? No, Maya said, flipping to the next page. Needed her to sign off before we fired her. Without that, the system defaulted to deadlock. Can we override it? Nope. Bypass? Nope. Rebuild? Maya gave a slow, exhausted blink. Rebuilding our encryption infrastructure from scratch across all subsidiaries with audit trails intact and contract continuity would take conservatively 9 months. If we don't get sued halfway through. Eli leaned back in his chair and muttered, she built a kill switch. No, Maya corrected. Voice dry, we approved a kill switch. She just made sure no one noticed until it bit us. Somewhere in the back, someone laughed, that panicked, half-cough of a laugh you hear when the plane drops a few thousand feet and no one's sure if it's turbulence or goodbye. Gavin did not laugh. He looked like he was chewing drywall behind his teeth. But why would she do that? He finally asked. She didn't, Maya said. You did. You removed her without reading the protocol, without asking what she owned. You terminated a legal authority without succession. You didn't just fire her, Gavin. You nullified her existence in the system. The words dropped like wet concrete. Nullified. They hadn't just erased her access. They'd tripped a failsafe. Jessica had written the system to assume she'd never be removed without ceremony, documentation, or process, because that's how sane companies operate. The moment she was yanked like a bad molar, the system did what it was built to do. Lock, freeze, wait, it got worse. The legal ratification wasn't buried in some internal memo. It was embedded in an appendix from a Q4 board packet, signed by the former CTO, former head of risk, and yes, 2 current board members, both of whom claimed they had no memory of approving any such clause. But their signatures didn't lie. And Jessica? She hadn't lifted a finger. She wasn't calling journalists or tweeting screenshots or shopping a tell-all to Forbes. She was silent, which made it so much worse. Because they didn't just need her now, they needed her to choose to help them. And as Maya so eloquently put it, you can't subpoena someone into being nice. By the time the board was looped in, they weren't asking about layoffs. They were asking one question. Where is Jessica? No one had an answer, but she knew. She knew exactly where they were in the playbook. That panicked, pre-apology phase, the bargaining stage. The stammering realization that the person they discarded like an empty toner cartridge had been the silent keystone holding the cathedral together. And just as the room began drafting a statement, spinning the problem as a transitional miscommunication, the release logs lit up with a new alert, external authorization pending. Token not present. They didn't know it yet. She was watching. And the clause? The clause was just the first domino. The founder hadn't shown his face in over a year. Not since the acquisition talks stalled and he slipped into the shadows with a golden handshake and a half-hearted farewell post that read like it was written by his assistant's assistant. He was the ghost on the cap table now, respected, but removed. No one expected to see him again, let alone on a jittery, last-minute emergency Zoom call titled Operational Disruption Alignment. But there he was. Robert T. Viron, 72, half-buttoned dress shirt, face lined like an old blueprint, joining from what looked like a poorly lit sunroom with a coffee mug in one hand and contempt in the other. "What the hell did you people break?" he said without preamble. No one spoke. Gavin, sweating into his collarless shirt, tried to take the reins. "Bob, it's just a minor auth issue. We're resolving it, don't talk," Viron snapped. "Someone with a brain, talk." Maya, grim as a closed casket, unmuted. Jessica Raines was terminated without completing succession protocol. "She was the encryption cosigner. I know who the hell she is," Viron growled. "Then you know what Clause 14F is." He blinked, didn't respond. Just took a long, slow sip from his mug and muttered, "You fired the firewall." And that's when Ali, the poor, hoodie-clad engineer who hadn't slept in 2 days, finally cracked. He stood from his seat, reached into his desk drawer, and lifted a small black USB-C device between his thumb and forefinger. "This," he said, holding it up like it was radioactive, "is the master key. Silence. The system won't push releases, won't reauthorize certs, won't pass compliance pings without handshake validation from this device." Viron narrowed his eyes. "And where's the backup?" Lee gave a small, tragic laugh. She was the backup, another silence. Not the stunned kind, this one carried weight, the weight of shared realization. A collective "oh, we are so absolutely, irreversibly screwed." She wrote the clause, Lee continued, voice shaking now. She embedded the logic in the deployment stack. She set up the offboarding protocols. She designed the damn thing so that without her explicit offboarding, it defaults to lockdown. He looked around the room, eyes darting from Gavin to Maya to the board rep who'd once called Jessica overcautious in a budget review. "And we can't even simulate access without her. There's no override. There's no test environment that replicates the behavior. It's her or nothing." Gavin's jaw clenched. "There has to be a workaround." "Sure," Elise said, "if we want to build a whole new infrastructure stack, and recertify every client, and rewrite every encryption key from the ground up. That'll only take, what, 9 months, maybe a year?" Viron set his mug down. "I gave her that authority," he said almost to himself, "because she asked for it, quietly. Said she was tired of watching people cut corners just to look fast. Said she wanted the system to outlast incompetence." He looked up straight at Gavin. "Congratulations, you proved her right." The board rep, Vanessa something, an ex-consultant with a 4-syllable title, tried to interject with corporate damage control. "Perhaps we can approach this collaboratively through mediation." "No," Viron snapped. "There's no mediating this. She doesn't owe you access, you need to ask." Gavin, who had finally realized this might be the end of his Teg's fantasy arc, leaned back, blinking hard. "This is blackmail." "No," Maya said quietly. "This is architecture." And finally, for the first time since Jessica left, no one said a word. They sat there, half-dozen people in $300 ergonomic chairs, blinking into silence while a tiny piece of plastic on Ali's desk hummed like a tiny guillotine. Outside, systems continued to stall. Deployments blinked amber. The release calendar remained frozen. A memo from a major client had just hit Gavin's inbox, flagged urgent, with words like non-performance and breach of contract. And far, far away, Jessica sat in her garden, fingers wrapped around a mug of chamomile, watching sparrows hop along the fence line. She hadn't moved. Hadn't spoken, because she didn't need to. They finally understood. She wasn't a legacy. She was the lock, and the only one holding the key. Gavin tried to spin it. Of course he did. By Friday morning, Viron's homepage was scrubbed of anything remotely resembling trouble. His LinkedIn post, complete with a filtered headshot and the company logo nestled proudly behind him, read like a bottle of startup-flavored NY Quill, transitioning through an exciting compliance modernization initiative, building resilient pathways for scalable growth. Internally, it was a panic room on fire. Externally, he was hashtagging #resilience and #digital transformation like that could patch a failing deployment queue. But the cracks weren't just showing. They were gaping. Major defense-adjacent client, the one that required biometric deployment signatures and quarterly encryption audits, sent a formal notice of intent to terminate pending breach review. Another partner, a multinational logistics firm, froze invoice payments until platform reliability can be demonstrably restored. One international bank's VP of risk assessment allegedly muttered to his assistant, "They fired the wrong woman," for killing their integration timeline. Legal was on life support. Maya was now working from a war room with no windows and 2 whiteboards full of increasingly frantic flowcharts labeled things like "rebuild path implausible" and "find Jessica not optional." And Gavin, he started skipping meetings. At first it was calendar conflicts, then focus sprints, then nothing. By Sunday afternoon, he hadn't responded to a single investor inquiry, and someone from comms quietly removed him from the external press queue. The board was circling like vultures wearing Gucci. During the emergency investor call that evening, the chairman, who'd spent most of the week in polite denial, finally snapped. "This is no longer a technology issue," he said, voice flat, teeth grinding through a Zoom connection. "It's a fiduciary liability. You will call her." And just like that, everyone stopped pretending. Lee was tasked with finding my number. He didn't dig through HR records. He didn't ask legal. He opened his phone, scrolled past group chats full of memes and coffee orders, and tapped on my name. Jessica, old Slack friend, the line rang. Half a continent away, I was sitting in my garden. The air was still. Mid-fall, leaves gathering like regrets along the patio stones. My German shepherd was asleep at my feet, twitching in a dream. I saw the name. I didn't move. Let it ring once, twice, 3 times, then I answered. I didn't speak. Neither did he at first. There was a kind of quiet panic in Lee's breath, like he wasn't sure if I was real or if I'd already slipped into legend. When he finally spoke, it was like stepping onto a frozen lake. Jess, hi, it's Lee. I don't even know where to start. I said nothing. They need you. I mean, everyone does. The system's locked. Clients are furious. Gavin's, well, gone. Sort of, the board wants to talk. Or no, wait, they want you to talk. If you're even willing, God, Jess, they're falling apart. Silence. I sipped my tea. The wind moved through the maple tree like it knew the whole story. Illy waited. I could hear him fidgeting, clicking something. A pen, maybe. I imagined him in his office, hoodie half-zipped, monitors flashing red alerts he couldn't dismiss, a company collapsing in real time behind him. Please, he said finally. Just hear them out. I breathed in. Let the silence settle again like fog on a windshield. Then I said, fine, one word, enough to make him exhale like he'd been holding his breath for 3 days. They'll send a Zoom link, he said quickly. I'll text it. Thanks, really, Jess. I hung up, not out of cruelty, but because I didn't owe them conversation. I owed them presents, and that's what they were about to get. Presents, leverage, and consequences inside. My laptop sat closed. The tooth, my master key, rested on a glass tray beside a folded letter from my lawyer titled Consulting Terms Draft 2. I had the power and I had the time, and they had none of either. I looked down at my dog. You ready, buddy? He twitched once in his sleep, tail thumped. Good enough. The garden was quiet again. The call was done, but the reckoning, that was just beginning. The link came through at 6:02 a.m. my time. Subject line, Viron reinstatement discussion. Cute. As if I was some intern begging for scraps, ready to grovel back into the building I built with the bones of my weekends. As if I'd ever go back. No reply. Not yet. Let them twitch. I poured my coffee slow. Stepped outside, let the cold morning air bite. My inbox was stacked, Maya's increasingly desperate emails, a direct one from the chairman titled Proposal, with a question mark that smelled like pure panic, and a short, sharp note from an unfamiliar corporate counsel at Latham and Watkins asking if I was amenable to dialogue. I was, but not that kind. So I opened a fresh doc. Titled it, Terms of Cooperation. First clause, $3.5 million lump sum severance, retroactive to the day Gavin smiled at me like a dog who just discovered mirrors. Labeled as ethical breach compensation for improper termination and unmitigated credential mishandling. Second clause, full intellectual property recognition for all embedded compliance infrastructure authored between 2019 and 2023. Transferable only at my discretion and only under co-signature. Third clause, $1,000/hour consulting rate, minimum 20-hour monthly retainer. Non-negotiable. Fourth clause, system oversight authority with non-revocable audit access across all encryption protocols for 5 fiscal years. Any attempt to curtail said oversight would result in immediate system lockdown. Fifth and final clause, Gavin's resignation effective immediately. Not a condition, just a courtesy note to confirm the obvious. I attached the doc, no pleasantries, no emoji, no hope this finds you well. Subject, restoring stability. Clicked send. 30 minutes later, the board huddled on video. I didn't join, let them sweat in their Brady Bunch grit of shame. Word came trickling in through Lee first. Holy crap, Jess, they're flipping out, half say yes, half are crying about optics. A few minutes after that, Meyer emailed a redlined version. I didn't open it. The chairman followed with a one-line message. Would you consider revising the figure? I replied with a PDF, Terms of Cooperation Final. No changes. Another hour. Then from Robert T. Viron himself, approved, full terms, process it today. 4 words. That's all it took to remind the entire company who still had spine. A few minutes later, a DocuSign packet came through, followed by a wire confirmation. $3.5 million already in transit. Another ping, a shared Slack channel labeled Consulting Jessica R. My access reinstated, not as staff, but as external authority. I had full visibility, total control, and zero responsibility for their egos. When I finally joined the Zoom call, they were already mid-meeting, voices stumbling over one another like drunks on a sinking ship. The founder was present. Gavin noticeably was not. I didn't turn on my camera, just shared my screen. The system dashboard appeared, frozen for days, alerts piled like dirty dishes. I plugged in the tooth. One blink, then green. Every function unlocked. Deployments cleared, certs refreshed, clients reconnected. Nobody spoke. I didn't say you're welcome. I didn't gloat. I just moved the cursor to the upright corner and hit leave meeting. Later, a junior analyst would say it felt like the moment the sun came back. Let them believe that, but I didn't return to the company. I stood above it now, quiet, sovereign, expensive. They had fired me like dead weight. Now they paid me like oxygen. Balance restored. They called an emergency all hands. Monday morning, 8 o'clock a.m. sharp. The kind of company-wide call that comes with 3 calendar reminders and a mandatory attendance tag. Viron Systems Platform Restoration Update. No cheerful emojis, no Gavin grinning in a hoodie, just a flat, grim invitation and the unspoken weight of failure hanging over every invite. Over 600 employees logged in. Product managers, engineers, HR, sales reps with panicked smiles. A few execs with their usual puffed-up Zoom angles, pretending this was just another alignment opportunity. Most of them had no idea what was about to happen, only that something had gone deeply, catastrophically wrong, and that someone was about to get publicly eviscerated. The screen flickered. First up was the founder, Robert T. Viron. This time wearing a blazer over a rumpled t-shirt, hair brushed like someone had reminded him the company still had press exposure. He didn't smile, didn't warm the room, just stared directly into the camera. "We've had a difficult week," he began, voice steady. "Our systems experienced a full-scale compliance stall due to a failure in internal processes. Not a hack, not a breach, a mistake." He let that sit. A leadership mistake. Gavin shifted in his square. His camera was on, but his face had gone corpse pale. If you looked close, you could see the glint of sweat crawling near his hairline. He opened his mouth once as if to speak, but Robert raised a hand without looking. "Not now." And then, without introduction, without a drum roll or corporate fanfare, another square lit up. Bottom right corner, no camera, just a screen share window. Black terminal. System dashboard open. Jessica R., external consultant, my name. No title. No welcome. Just the quiet weight of my presence. Dashboard was live. Green. Status. Operational. Encryption. Stable. Deployments flowing. Across the system logs, one line repeated like a heartbeat. Authorized. The entire company saw it. No applause. No welcome back, Jessica. In the chat. Just absolute reverent silence. And then Gavin, dear Gavin, stood up. In his little camera box, you could see him rise from his Herman Miller chair, jaw clenched, muttering something that probably felt brave in his own head. He didn't say it aloud, he didn't need to. The movement was enough. He started walking out of frame, and somewhere in the building before he reached the elevator, his badge deactivated. The door wouldn't open. The green light above the panel blinked red. In the all-hands zoom, you could see the moment it hit him, when he realized that even his exit was out of his control now. The founder cleared his throat. "Let's be clear," he said. "She doesn't work for us anymore. She runs compliance. And as of this moment, any changes to system integrity, encryption, or client-side authorization will pass through her desk." He paused, no exceptions. Someone in the sales team started to clap, awkward, offbeat, one of those desperate gestures of allegiance. Robert just stared, no need for performance, just do your jobs, and with that, the screen flicked off. No exit music, no branded out row, just black. Back at home, I sat at my desk. Same tea-stained coaster. Same window view of the garden, sun breaking slow across the lawn. The tooth was plugged in. The dashboard pulsed, calm and controlled. One field blinked, action required, release cycle authorization. I typed one word, authorized, closed the terminal, and exhaled. No revenge monologue, no final mic drop. They didn't need words, they had silence. And the woman who weaponized it. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.